Welcome into episode 84 of the Level Flight podcast. My name is Connor. I've got Brian here with me today, and we've got a very special guest joining us, Garret Hohl. You probably follow him at Twitter at Garret Hohl, or you subscribe to the Five Hohl Substack. Like myself, I highly recommend it. Full of great nuggets, analytics regarding the Winnipeg Jets. Garret, how you doing? And maybe plug yourself a little bit for people who haven't heard.
So you most likely have either, if you're on social media, you've either like me because I say things a certain way, or you hate me because I say things a certain way. So there's no in the middle ground.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, this is a Jets podcast. They've clinched their first round matchup against the Colorado Avalanche. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about the present. They've won 6 straight games back-to-back against Dallas and Colorado, outscoring them 10-0. Garret, I know you're big into analytics, and we'll get heavily into analytical stuff in a bit. But just on the surface, what did you see from those last 2 games in Dallas, in Colorado, from the Jets that led to, such a dominant performance in both games?
They got goaltending. I mean, they got a lot more than that, and they scored 10 goals. But had they only scored 2 with the goaltending they still would have won anyways.
For sure.
That's nothing to slag them or anything like that. I thought they played quite well. I mean, a lot of the analytics would suggest that the actual shot quantity and quality was fairly even between the two teams, but a lot of that was after the game was pretty much in the Jets' control, and that it was already fairly one-sided and mostly determined. And so I would discount that quite a bit, especially later in the season where Bonus is, playing a little bit of not game management, but what do they call it in basketball where they're resting the players all the time? Well, he's doing a little bit of that when the game's out of hand.
Load management.
Load management. There you go. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
In terms of, obviously you mentioned the goaltenders, and I feel like can't really say too many, good things about them, but outside of them, are there any players that kind of stuck out to you in a good way, or some that maybe were, performing far less than expectation?
Over the 6-game win streak, or over the specific 2 games, or
I'd say, overall over the 6 game, but I mean, obviously the last 2 were a lot more sort of notable given the stakes. So, I feel like if you can find something out in the last 2, great, but over the entirety 2 works.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the Jets' middle 6 for the last 2. If I was going over the all 6, I would say that it's definitely varies game to game, because there are some games where some players, like for example, over the 6-game win streak, there were some games where Ehlers was very, very dominant, and there was one game in particular where he was very, very bad, and
Nashville.
We all saw what happened during that game. So over the 6-game span, I would say it was all. I mean, that's why you want to have depth, because no player is, unless you have someone like Connor McDavid. Well, I mean, even Connor McDavid's not perfect, but generally speaking, when you don't have an elite level player beyond Connor Hellebuyck, and I would suggest also Josh Morrissey, you kind of need that depth, because not every player is going to be going all the time. These people are human. They have ups, they have downs, they have girlfriend and wives that they might argue with the night before. Some of them have kids, and I have 2 young ones, and believe me, sometimes that makes my day-to-day very volatile. That's why you want depth, right? It's to play your odds. But I would definitely say in the 2 games where the Jets, they faced against tough competition, and they've, I made a joke on the Five Hohl. I always like to preview the next week's games, and I kind of made a joke about Nashville, Colorado, and Dallas road trip being like the true test, because people love to say that, and it's playoff level teams coming just before the playoffs, where everyone likes to say that the level of competition steps up a notch, and you kind of see a real measure of what the Jets can do. Whether or not this is going to be predictive of how they play in the playoffs still remains to be seen. But yeah, I thought that the Lowry line and the Monahan lines played exceptionally well over those two games. The fourth line had its ups and downs, and the Scheifele line had its ups and downs. But yeah.
Yeah, that I do want to ask about the Ehlers, Monahan to Foley line, because while the top line has been, like in the Colorado game and the Dallas games, at least from what I could see on public tracking things, they were negative in Corsi and shot share, but the expected goals weren't too bad. So they were generating some high danger chances, some scoring chances. But that second line of Ehlers, Monahan to Foley has like outscored their opponents 9-2, I think. The expected goals are above 60% from what I've seen online as well. Just that second line, what do you think makes it work so well? And is it the best line analytically, or one of the best that the Jets have put together this season?
Well, my confidence in my answer is always dependent on the size of sample. Because I mean, one of the lines that everyone's complaining about over the past 2 or 3 weeks is a line that, for the first 2.5 games at the beginning of the season was actually quite dominant. So you never really can tell for certain because, as I said, players have ups and downs, and, sometimes they have injuries and whatnot. But yeah, they have been doing very, very well in the time that they have. And as you mentioned, like there's both shot share and expected goals and actual goal differential. When just to kind of give a primer, because not always people know exactly what we mean by that, is shot differential, shot share, like Corsi, is a lot more predictive of future success, while expected goal differential is more telling of why a team did as good as they did, or line or player. So to give it the Scheifele line example, over the 2 games, they were about even in an expected goal differential, which means, despite them being shelled and being in their own defensive zone more often than not, they were able to keep the quality against low and the quality for high, which made the end result not that bad. But we don't predict that to be a winning formula, specifically speaking for that line. So, you'd hope that going into the playoffs, that will change, just because the fact that no team really carries that on for a long time. But the other thing to think about is, the threshold level of what's acceptable differs by line, because of the fact that you're giving them more ice time. So I can't remember, it's been a long time since I've looked at it, but like the average top line, I think you want to be not at around 50%, but you want to be above 52, 53%. And that's just for the regular season. The playoffs, you're like removing some of the worst first lines, because, weaker teams are generally weakest because they're the top of their roster. So this is very, very tangential, and I apologize, I went way off topic. But speaking of like the Monahan line, Ehlers and Toffoli both historically are guys that have a tendency to make their line mates do better with them than away. And Monahan seems to be, at least chemistry wise, not hurting that. And so, it seems to work. I still think that the Jets have better options available to them, but in terms of how they manage the roster, but I don't think this is a bad one. Sorry, my cat's like attacking me. So.
Oh, there we go. Guest appearance.
Yeah.
Do you think? I mean, we kind of saw it in those last couple games where I know you had mentioned about the whole fact that the chance level for and against with the expected goals was less high danger against that the top line. But I'm curious to see, like, obviously we've seen in the past that they've got shelled both in quantity and quality. Do you think that if they sink back into allowing those really high danger chances, do you think, as you mentioned, that middle six playing so well, do you think that can help them, mitigate that, or is it really going to put them at a disadvantage?
Yeah. I haven't looked too much in terms of just overall playoff trend for success. Get out of my way. Sorry, my girls have gone to bed, and they're the ones that normally take care of distracting the cats.
All good.
But yeah, like I have looked at just the past cup winners going back from 2007, 2008, aka the behind the net era of hockey, the era that we have advanced analytics available to us. And there's never been a cup winner that has had a top line that is below 50 percentile in terms of shot metrics. And that's 50 percentile, not 50%. So, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's around the 52, 53% range. So that's not a good sign. That said, there's always exceptions to every rule. I mean, there's the Montreal Canadiens almost won the cup one year, and if they had won, they would have been an exception, and they were very close to winning that. So you never know, because you get a hot goalie, you can go a long way. So it's not a good sign just because of the fact that the top line is the guys that are taking the bulk of your ice time, but not only are they taking the bulk of their ice time, they're taking the bulk of the ice time against the top lines. So like the Jets love to hard match as much as possible with the Lowry line, but you have to understand that like a line that's playing 17 minutes versus a line that's playing, I don't know, 12. I have to look into how the Jets distribution actually is, but there's only so much hard matching you can do. The lines that are on the top, like Scheifele, still see the top lines the most. And so when you're getting the bulk of the ice time and you're getting the bulk of the prime leverage ice time, so like, for example, fourth lines don't hurt you as much as their ice time because they, generally speaking, play lower leverage minutes. They don't play like the end of the periods. They don't play as much when the game's close. So just looking from an ice time percentage, that kind of under exaggerates how much actual leverage a line has. So it's not a great sign even with the middle six playing very, very well. That said, it doesn't mean that's not an impossible hurdle to get over.
Totally. One thing that I've appreciated, and you've posted a lot and written in the Five Hohl, is you've been tracking entries and exits kind of like game by game. You've tracked almost every game. I see you tweet now and then that you're catching up on games, tracking games, things like that. But I listen to Rick Bowness speak a lot in my life. And he always talks about the fact that when they manage the puck well, they're a really good hockey team. And then when they beat Colorado 7-0, what was the first thing out of his mouth? We managed the puck well. When they lose, when they get blown out, what's the first thing he says? We didn't manage the puck well. As someone who tracks entries and exits for every single game, is there a correlation there? When the Jets, I mean, generally speaking in hockey, if you control the puck more through the neutral zone and into the opposition zone, you're going to have more success. But for the Winnipeg Jets, is it even kind of more, what's the word I'm looking for? Even more of like a presentable issue that if they don't manage the puck well, everything just falls apart around them?
Yeah, I've actually never looked into something that specific to the latter part of your question. To the former part, I mean, it is a standard coachism. That is something that all coaches pretty much say. And it's not to be negative towards that at all. I mean, people think that because I criticize the decisions coaches make that I don't actually have a lot of respect for them. I actually think that, especially when I worked with coaches and the NHL teams previously, one of the things you really do is understand is that, you know, these guys are experts at their field for a reason. They might have biases and blind spots, but they know what they're doing. And like coaches are really, really good. Actually, not just even talking about coaches. Let's just talk general decision, sociological, psychological sciences, and economic sciences and behavioral sciences. One of the things we find out is experts are really, really good at what's called like base rates. So from a hockey perspective, they're really good at intuitively finding out things that are known to impact the way things are. Like, for example, the coaches very early discovered that the third player on the line matters less when you're looking at the sum of their parts, which is something that analytics proved to be true maybe like 5 or so years ago. This was something that even coaches were doing in the 80s, where they put two players together, and the third guy was kind of, more of this guy's more there because of the chemistry that he provides onto that line. Mm-hmm. So like, and this is true with like handedness, and this is true, like having a left shot guy on the left side and the right shot guy on the right side, and all these like different factors. Like, they're very good at like understanding like, oh, this causes that. Mm-hmm. The thing that sometimes experts, not just in hockey, but like in what we find in a lot of behavioral academia, is that that sometimes the issue is trade-offs, and that's just because humans naturally are not very good at determining trade-offs. So that's like looking at like, yeah, maybe having two right shot wingers on the same line isn't a good thing in general, but they might not necessarily be bad in this specific context just because mm-hmm. of chemistry or just the quality of them. So going back to puck management and stuff like that, like obviously, I mean, everyone knows puck management is an important thing, and the Jets definitely do better when they control the puck, and that's true for everyone because no one wants to give up the puck. I mean, like, what's the opposite of puck management? That's giving the other team possession. So, mm-hmm. But generally speaking, like, you look at someone like Nikolai Ehlers, who got spoken about his puck management problems. Let's not talk about the Nashville game, because this was something that came up much, much before that, a little bit after he first got taken off the top line. And it's true that in terms of aggregate turnovers, Ehlers is one of the biggest offenders, but that's because he has the puck more often. So you're kind of getting a little tricked by that. So going back to your initial point or initial question about the Jets, like I don't know if the Jets are particularly I'm struggling for the same word that you were trying to figure out. Like I can't get it, but
emphasizing.
I don't know if there's like I don't know if there's a correlation with the Jets' performance and puck management that's more steeper, good English, that's steeper than what we would normally expect. Okay. But I also would say that like the Jets on average are a better puck management team than most of the teams in the NHL. Now they're going against one of the teams that's even better than them at puck management. I think actually, like, these aren't my numbers, because while I track every game, I track specifically in the context of the Jets. Tracking for both teams is very, very difficult to do, especially if you're doing it live. Back when I had hockey data, I had employees do it for me because, it's a lot. It's a lot of effort, even if you're using technology to make things easier, like AI and such. The looking at Corey Schneider's data at all three zones, the Colorado Avalanche are the best team in terms of creating chances out of defensive zone recoveries, which basically means that when the Colorado Avalanche get the possession of the puck in the defensive zone, they're more likely to have the next chance without losing the puck than any other team in the NHL. So that's why, and they're very dependent on that kind of like rush offense, which is why one of the things that you saw that worked very well was the Jets were able to really wreck their rush game in terms of how they forechecked them, and also their one of the undervalued areas for the Jets is how much they clutter up the neutral zone and how aggressive they are in the neutral zone, and that really caused havoc with the Avalanche and their rush offense. So like puck management, I think, is important for the Jets, but I say like in terms of their success against both the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars, it's going to be very much not based off of their puck management, although that will matter. It's more about how they disrupt the puck management of Colorado and Dallas, because that's their game.
Totally. Yeah. We're going to stick around. We're going to hear a word from DraftKings. And when we come back, we're going to get more into the first round. It is official. The Jets and Avalanche are playing against one another. We've got Garret here from the Five Hohl. We're going to preview it. Stick around after this word from DraftKings.
We know hockey games move fast, but with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, you can score faster than anything happening on the ice. This week, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app with code THPN. New customers bet $5 on the NHL and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code THPN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, licensee partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/hockey for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. NHL and the NHL Shield are registered trademarks of the National Hockey League. Copyright NHL 2024, all rights reserved. And welcome back into episode 84 of the Level Flight podcast. If you've already been sticking around, you know that we've got Garret Hohl with us today. And, you know, we know the opponent. We know roughly it's going to start at some point between Saturday through Monday. The Jets are playing the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of the NHL playoffs. Garret, I want to know, sort of, even just on the surface level, how do you think these two teams stack up against each other in the first round here?
I'm always, the last time I made a premonition about how a team would stack up against the Jets, and what was when I said the Jets would rather the Montreal Canadiens win against the Toronto Maple Leafs for an easier opponent, and we all know how that worked out. So I say this with a very, very large handful of salt, but in my personal opinion, and somewhat backed up by analytics, the Jets have a very, I mean, not just analytics, just the standings and what most people would consider with the eye test and such. The Jets definitely have a tough road ahead of them, with being Colorado, and then after that, the winner between is it Dallas and Vegas?
Yeah,
it's Dallas and Vegas, right? I can't remember what that. Yeah, that's not an easy road to go through. But I mean, they're also looking at the other way. That Winnipeg's not an easy road to go through, and then they have to go through Dallas or Vegas. So there is two sides to it. But I think that the Jets are a team that can perform well against, I mean, we've seen it. I think the Jets were a perfect sweep in the regular season against Colorado. I can't remember now if was it perfect sweep? Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, so Columbus was also a perfect sweep against the LA Kings the year that the LA Kings won the cup, and Columbus stunk that year. But so that doesn't necessarily mean everything, but yeah. So like looking into like the individual facets of between the two teams, ironically, I wrote about this today, so that kind of works out. And you sent me that we'd be discussing this before I published that, so it wasn't like you're trying to shill for me and sell my blog. So, but regardless, the check's in the mail. Looking at there's certain things that are kind of predictive of future success, especially in the playoffs. Despite everyone saying that defense wins championships, the actual strongest measure in predicting success in the playoffs is actually 5-on-5 offense, which unfortunately does give the Colorado Avalanche a little bit of an advantage. The Jets are above average in that manner, and they're actually about, I'm trying to remember, just a little bit under. Because what I did is I compared Colorado Avalanche not just to the Jets, but I compared both of them also to the past Cup winners going all the way back to 2007-2008 season. And I believe Colorado Avalanche are basically around the same quality of 5-on-5 offense for creating chances, and both in shot quantity and quality as this average Stanley Cup team. But the Jets, while being better than the average NHL team, they're below the average Cup winning team. So there is a slight advantage with Colorado there on 5-on-5 offense. But the second strongest measure that actually correlates with success is goaltending. And the Jets right now, let's just say the Winnipeg Jets were to win the Stanley Cup. The Jets would win the Stanley Cup with the best performing goaltender tandem of any Cup winner. Although it'd be fairly close. I think there's a couple of Kings and Thomas that wouldn't be that far off. But just looking at regular season performance in terms of predicting postseason performance, the Jets definitely have the advantage there. Not only the Jets well above the average Stanley Cup winning goaltender, obviously, because they would be the best performing one. The Colorado Avalanche goaltending hasn't been that great. They haven't been bad relative to the average NHL team, but they have been bad relative to successful playoff teams.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next kind of stuff that comes after that is, unfortunately, power play, finishing, and 5-on-5 defense are about equal. The Jets do have the advantage on 5-on-5 defense. It's actually almost exact opposite of the relationship with 5-on-5 offense, where the Jets are about average relative to a Stanley Cup winner, for offense for Colorado. And then the other one is above average for an NHL team, but below average for a Stanley Cup winning team. So that is kind of interesting to think, and that'll definitely be the primary battle that we'll probably be seeing. I mean, we kind of talked about that when we talked about like the transition game. So I think Colorado is going to be really focused on trying to create that offense, especially because not only do they create a lot of chances off the rush, but they're actually, I believe, the highest shooting percentage team on the rush. So they're not just creating a lot of chances, but they're very good at finishing those chances. And the Jets are about average for finishing relative to an NHL team, not relative to a quality playoff team. So that's going to be their struggles, especially with special teams, because we know the Jets aren't great there. The good news is, when I found out this research, is that penalty kill doesn't seem to be that important in predicting Stanley Cup success. In terms, the Jets are like pretty bad there, and they would be among the worst penalty killing teams if they were to win the Stanley Cup. But the average Stanley Cup winner is only league average in penalty kill, which is quite impressive given the fact that the bottom half of the NHL doesn't even make the playoffs, let alone win the Stanley Cup. So I found that kind of interesting. So that's good news to hear that the Jets' worst weakness is something that matters. It's not that the penalty kill matters less in the playoffs. It's just that regular season penalty kill doesn't seem to predict too well how you will perform in the playoffs.
Yeah, and common coach speak, common player speak is that home ice advantage is crucial, and the Jets can clinch that with 1 point over these final two games. You talked earlier about how the Jets do like to hard match their lines. Adam Lowry is going to be coming over the boards every time Nathan McKinnon does inside Canada Life Center. How important is home ice advantage? Like really predictive of, because these teams are dead even in the standings basically going into that game on Saturday. So there's not really a home ice advantage in terms of like a Dallas versus an LA or a Vegas. It's not like the 1 seed playing the 8 seed. But for teams that are so evenly matched, does home ice really matter?
Yeah. So if you're to just kind of do a rough look at home ice advantage, you'll see that it is fairly significant. Now, that's also, as you mentioned, some of that data is the fact that, when you have the better teams are the teams that tend to have home ice advantage. Usually the top team, the 1 seed plays against the 8 seed and such. So that does conflate the data a little bit. But when you do try to account for that, home ice advantage, I think, is something like the home ice team, after accounting for quality of team, you're looking at like 52 to 53% win rates for the home team. And that is interesting, or not interesting to see, but that's good to see, because that seems like my accounting works, because that's about the same as what we see in the regular season. The difference is that it doesn't always matter. So like going back to 2007, 2008, which is like 14 playoffs, I think 12 of them, the home team has a winning percentage, even after accounting for team quality. But there's actually 2 seasons where visiting teams won actually more often, the team that didn't have the home advantage. But that's just kind of volatility. It's just there's fewer games in the playoffs, and so you get a lot more of that volatility, because the average between the average regular season, the average playoffs, looking over the whole span, is about the same. It's just that because there's smaller samples, you kind of see the playoffs kind of go like that. So it matters, because every little bit's going to matter, especially when you have, as you mentioned, like 2 teams that are, a lot tighter. You're going to look at like 52 to 53%, boost, even if everything else was equal. That's or not 52, 53% boost, but a boost to 52, 53%. Everything else held equal. That's pretty significant. That that turns into, I think, you should never do math live, but I think that works to like an actual series win of like 55%. I could be off by that math, so don't quote me on that. Never do math live in your head on stream.
definitely quoting you on it. Anyways, all right, Garret, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Previewing the first round. Maybe on the way out, let people know where they can find your work and what you've got coming up as we approach the playoffs.
So you can find me on Twitter. That might be fun. That might be annoying, depending on your preferences. I am an acquired taste. I get that. Like, I do it intentionally too. So sorry. But I like to talk hockey. You can also sometimes find me on Reddit, sometimes on a couple other places, but I like to blog on the Jets. The Five Hohl, we do 2 free posts. I say we, it's still just me. I do 2 free posts a week on Mondays and Fridays. Monday, I focus on kind of like reviewing and previewing and talking about like current news. Fridays, I basically do a whole bunch of mini stories based off of what people ask me. And also kind of like touching on some other subjects, some stuff that I actually have an education backgrounds too. I just kind of more fell into hockey analytics as a passion. So
All right, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been episode 84 with Garret Hohl. We will be back, Brian and I, and maybe Elliot as well, on Thursday for episode 85 of the Level Flight podcast. We'll be breaking down the Kraken game, previewing the
Matthew Perreault episode.
The Matthew Perreault episode, 100%.
I better not miss that one.
There you go.
How I miss him.
And then, of course, we will be back Sunday morning, 9 a.m. for LFP Live, the 10th edition. So join us then. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you Thursday. Enjoy the games this week and have a great week, everyone.